perk up your ears and open your minds. You're listening to Music Student 101. It's time for some more ear training with your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
And welcome back, everybody. As promised, today we're going to talk about intervals and how to identify them by listening to them. Of course, I'm talking about ear training.
That's right. You know, ear training is one of the things that if you don't have to do it already, you're going to have to do it very, very soon.
Well, you have to learn it early on because it'll only help you. And these are the tools that, we're giving you the tools to learn what you need to know, but it's a matter of time progression before everything starts to really gel. Even a couple of weeks ago, there was something I heard, hey, okay, I know what that chord is. You know, you'll listen to something and it'll just kind of pop up. So that's the exciting part about learning these things.
Absolutely, very exciting. I used to listen to really, really great musicians of all genres and walks of life, and they just loved to listen to music first and foremost, and they were extremely excited about hearing new music. And I would watch them listening to music in concerts and things, and I would think, wow, you know, what are they hearing that I'm not hearing? You know, I mean, I'm hearing this music that's being played, but how is it different in their ears? What do they do this different? And ear training is the study of, in some respects, how that is different. It is teaching yourself to listen to music the way a musician listens to music, and to understand a fairly good bit about what you're hearing, you know, based solely on your ability to hear it. So with that in mind, the first basic steps of ear training is learning how to recognize simple intervals. And by simple intervals, we mean intervals that fall within an octave. So between one note named C and the next note named C, we of course have 12 notes, 12 divisions of that interval that's called an octave. Incidentally, that is the interval that is called a perfect octave.
There is no other octave, is there?
There is no other octave, no. Although there is what you can technically see something called a diminished octave.
Ooh.
It is enharmonically equivalent to a major seventh.
Copy that.
But we will get to that later.
All right. Fair enough.
Within that octave, there are 12 notes that are our chromatic scale, and within those 12 notes that are chromatic scale, we have one of the basic building blocks of all Western harmony, which is the 7 notes making up the major scale. And going back down,
we've all heard that before.
oh yeah, very, very, very common. Even if you're not a music student, haven't been one up until now, I'm sure you've heard of that. We have a couple of different ways of talking about these in ear training, and one of the ways is to relate this back to scale degree. So if we call our first note and our last note, those 2 notes that made up the octave, if we call those scale degree 1, then we just label the rest of the scale accordingly, and we can sing those notes that way. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Did I just hear an abbreviation for 7?
Yes, you heard sev as
Okay,
far as
that's what I thought I
instead
heard.
of 7. Yes, it's to keep you from having to, you know, get into 16th notes as you're singing the scale. You know, this is a good time to iterate this fact, and I will doubtlessly iterate this fact again as we go on, but I cannot sing. Okay, I am not a singer. Yeah, Jeremy is nodding at me.
I'm the same way, man. I can do great background vocals, but I can't sing when I'm called upon to do it all by myself.
Yeah, I have never claimed to be a singer. I will never purport to be a singer. But it just goes to show you that if I can do this stuff, trust me, anybody can.
Right.
And it's not about being a fantastic singer. This is about learning to hear the relationships between these things. And that's more what we're worried about than how well you sing. You know, although, you know, learning to sing and hear a pitch and be able to sing it back is definitely important. All right, so This has a lot of advantages. First of all, it relates this stuff back to what you're talking about in theory when you talk about scale degree 3 or scale degree 7 or something like that. So you're using the same terminology both in ear training and in theory, which is very, very helpful. Another way that you will hear people talk about this is by using what we call solfege. And if you've ever seen The Sound of Music, you already know what this is. This is giving a syllable to every single note. So in the major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do.
So are you saying that do is more than just a female deer?
It is more than just a female deer, or less than just a female deer. Yes. And you'll also hear people talk about fixed do. All that is that means C is always do. So, and every other note, C, D sharp, D, E flat, A, G, all those other notes have syllables themselves. It doesn't change. Versus the much more common movable do, which is do is whatever note happens to be the tonic note, the first note of the scale that you're playing.
Gotcha. I think that would come in more handy anyways, because same thing with relating scale degrees, scale numbers to actual note names. If you hear a major scale, you don't have to have perfect pitch to know what key, or you don't have to know what note it starts with. As long as you recognize it's a major scale, you'll know what it is.
Absolutely, exactly right. Fixed do has a lot of its advantages have to do with when you start getting into sight singing 20th century music and hearing 20th century music and things like that, where the major scale is much less important and prominent in a method of construction in the music. As far as good old-fashioned diatonic Western European music goes, movable do is very, very common, and it is very, very helpful. And singing the scale degree numbers is also very helpful. Those are the two most common labeling systems you're going to hear about.
All right, here's some ways to hear some of these intervals. We'll take it from the top. We'll take it from the smallest possible interval. That's the minor second.
Absolutely. And what do you think of when you hear that interval?
I think a shark's about to tear me to bits.
Indeed, it is. That is the theme song to Jaws. The minor second. And then, of course, we have this.
That's the major second, right?
Right, yes.
Best way I can think of is if you're familiar with the major scale, what we talked about, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
It's the first two notes.
First two notes of the major scale. Also, I have here Yankee Doodle.
Yeah.
And then we have the minor third.
All right, so the minor third, if you want to think of one of everybody's favorite Christmas carols, Greensleeves.
Yeah, those first two notes. Play them one more time, just those first two notes. There it is, minor third. The first two notes of Greensleeves.
Indeed. And of course, the major third.
We talked about that being in the national anthem, right?
Right, yeah. If you want to sort of ignore the first few notes of the national anthem, the first few that go down, and then focus on those first two going up, that would be the major third. Right there.
Yep.
And then there's the perfect fourth. Here Comes the Bride, for all you married folks out there.
Yep, those first two notes.
Yeah.
Perfect fourth.
And to me, the perfect fifth always sounded like, some sort of cheap idea of a Roman trumpet out of like a Ben-Hur movie or something. It's got that kind of Roman feel to it, like not even like really Roman music, just sort of fake Roman music.
Mm-hmm.
Can also think of it, of course, as Star Wars. So the first two notes in the Rebel theme song.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
The tritone.
The tritone. Well, the tritone should be familiar to all Leonard Bernstein fans from the song Maria.
Maria. For those who don't know Bernstein, what's another good example?
It sounds to me like the sounds that a siren in France makes. It'll make you get out of the way.
Yes, it's a very alarming. The tritone was known as the devil's interval because it's as far as away as you can get from the tonic before you start heading back towards the tonic, right?
Exactly.
The furthest distance, and therefore the most dissonant.
Absolutely.
And, a lot of people consider that. What was the deal with the whole devil?
Well, they thought it would attract the spirit of the devil to you if it was sang or played.
Right.
So they avoided it at all costs.
So they stayed the hell away from that one.
Yes, indeed. Until of course Slayer came along.
Uh-huh. All right. What about the minor sixth?
The minor sixth reminds me of this song, a really old one called I believe it's called "In Egypt's Land."
Let my Cameron go.
Yeah.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off. If you've not seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, see it.
I don't know. I think everybody's seen that movie.
I hope so.
That's a classic.
I hope so.
If you've not seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the movie that launched Matthew Broderick's career, go see that movie. It's a funny movie.
If you didn't see, you don't know what the hell we're talking about.
Right, yeah, you don't know what we just did. That was an inside joke. So, but major sixth reminds me of the little NBC dealie.
Everyone's heard that.
Absolutely.
NBC.
Yeah. Or you can think of My Bonnie.
Mm-hmm.
So the first two notes. Yeah.
And then after the major sixth, the next thing we have is the minor seventh.
Minor seventh, which, if you're nerdy enough to remember this original Star Trek series. Those first two notes are a minor seven.
And if this is our first nerdy example, it certainly won't be our last.
No,
just to give you a heads up.
Yes, and not our first, not our last.
Right.
We've got much nerdiness in store.
The last one we have is the major seven, and right off the bat, I couldn't think of any tunes or melodies. It is a rare interval to be such a large interval. Not a lot of melodies really go straight to that from the one. So let's talk about good ways to kind of, identify it without actually having a melody in mind.
Absolutely. So you can hear when you play a major seven.
Where does it want to go?
Yes, exactly. It wants to go up. And
Right.
It wants to resolve back up to the tonic note, the note at the octave. So if you can train yourself to hear your...
There's that note. Yeah, did you hear the high note in the melody where it wanted to resolve? That was a 5/7 to 1 chord, was it not?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Technically, it was a 5/6/5 to 1.
And we'll talk about inversions later on too. But I think the one we used for the approach we used for the last one was known as the theory approach.
The theory approach, right? And you can, if the song thing isn't working for you, you can think of a lot of these in terms of their theory connotations. For example, the way the major seven is pulling up to 1, you can easily think of its inversion, the minor second, as wanting to do the same thing. If you think of the last note played there as the tonic chord, so... and the thirds, you will learn to sing major and minor arpeggios, and there's
Right.
the first notes of those arpeggios, so...
So there's a major arpeggio.
The major.
So there's your major third.
Minor. So, minor third.
Mm-hmm.
The sixths can be thought of those chords in inversion. If you just sort of went from starting with the fifth of the chord. So the major six is the lowest and highest note in that chord. And with a minor chord, you will get a minor six. And so, I use a mixture of sort of theory ways, songs I know. I think everybody everybody has to find a way of identifying all of these intervals that works for them.
Right. We just try to use folk examples because most people have heard these tunes. But if you have songs that you know have those intervals in them, use your own stuff.
Definitely use your own songs, and even better yet, try to use your theory chops, because knowing this stuff really well will come in handy in other classes when you start to take theory, because it is all the same information, like we said. So, given that, some other further strategies on identification of intervals, because believe it or not, this can be really hard, and students often have troubles with these. When it's one thing when you're trying to pick out a song, but when I give you and ask you what that was, it can be very difficult. It's always difficult. You have to learn this skill. So some strategies, what to do when you're faced with that and you have to tell what it is. First thing, shouldn't come as a surprise. Practice, 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 practice.
Sadly, that is the only real method. I mean,
really it is. Really it is.
We just had to just nail it in our heads,
Yeah. Play intervals on the piano and sing them to yourselves. You can sit here. I used to waste loads of time sitting here going. No, so over and over again until that sound got into my head. You can sit here and be practicing your arpeggios and your scales, singing them in your head when you're on the bus, when you're waiting for class to start. The great thing about ear training is you can practice it anywhere.
Right. Most schools have like practice rooms too, like soundproof piano practice rooms. You can get in there and really belt it out if you want to.
They do, yes. All right, so practice, practice, practice. Well, what do you practice? Well, whenever I hear an interval, I like to sing it silently in my head. And I like to sing it starting with the lowest note and then the highest note.
Right.
So if I were to hear, I would in my head sing.
So you heard you played them both as one unit, but now in your head you're separating them into two melodies.
Absolutely, and this is good. I mean, you're asked to do all of this, right? You're asked to play intervals. You're asked to identify them as their arpeggiato. I like that. Pretty easy. You're asked to identify them as harmonic units. Simultaneities. You're asked to identify them going down.
Which I can't stand.
Yeah, that's a hard one. That's hard. In all of these cases, what I do is sing the lowest note up to the highest note. Even when I was asked to do this for an interval going down.
Right, you flip it. And then you have it. At least you have the interval.
Right, and then you'll have the interval, because remember, interval is just about distance.
Right.
That's what the word interval means. So it really doesn't matter if you're going from top to bottom or bottom to top. It's the same distance. So I still sing those in my head the same way. Again, use the system of hearing that you're most comfortable with, whether it's learning different songs or melodies that have these intervals, whether it's using your theory or any mixture of those two when you sing in your head. Also, try to think in whatever labeling system your class has adopted.
Right.
Generally, a class will either adopt, numbers, or they'll adopt solfege. Try practicing thinking of these in these terms, because it will help you later on when intervals become scales and melodies and chords become harmonic progressions, and that becomes dictating whole pieces of music based solely on what you heard of it. Learning these systems will be very, very helpful. Always check yourself, even if it seems obvious, even if you think, oh, I know this is really easy. Always definitely check yourself. It is so easy to hear that and think of that as a major third, when in fact, it is a major sixth. A major third, a major sixth, these are two intervals that have a relatively similar dissonance level. In fact, a very similar dissonance level. So it's very difficult to just listen for the dissonance level, which is the first thing that hits your ear if you're just thinking, okay, that's what that is.
Yeah.
And be able to tell the difference. So always check yourself. Always sing from lowest to highest in your head. Even if you think you know the answer, it doesn't hurt to be sure.
Oh, let's talk about dissonance levels, if you will.
Sure.
Play us an octave real quick. This is the least dissonant something can be. All right, now do a perfect fifth.
Second least dissonant.
Third least, what do you think?
That would be the major third.
The major third. And then is it to the minor third? I can't remember. This is the overtune series.
I think, and then it goes to the major second. Yeah, and then to the minor second.
Right.
But remember, all of the inversions of these will have the same dissonance levels. All of this means that you can't listen for dissonance levels. That's not going to help you.
Right.
Not in interval dictation, not in melodic or harmonic dictation. You have to listen for where they fit in relation to the scale degrees.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that little discussion on intervals, and we'll be talking more about those later on. And you can look on our website and learn more about that as well.
And as always, if you have any questions at all, please do contact us.
Thanks for listening. And always be listening. For questions or comments, please email us at info@musicstudent101.com.